Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast is my new friend, Ben Higinbotham. Did I say your name right, Ben?
Yes, Higinbotham. Yep.
We didn't practice that before we went live, so Higinbotham, and grateful to have Ben on the podcast. Ben goes by the pronouns they, them, and so by inference, we're talking to somebody who's non-binary, and in Ben's case, gay. So I'm going to do my best to use they, them pronouns. Ben is okay with he, him, and even okay with she, her if they have to. And I think Ben will talk more about that. Ben is a BYU graduate from the music program. Ben is in their mid-30s. Ben works at a local printer. Ben lives in Utah County. Ben was in the Nauvoo as a missionary in the Nauvoo pageant, something our family had the chance to do maybe 15 years ago as a family. You were in the band. And what instrument did you play?
In the brass band, I played the clarinet.
Wow.
Which is not a brass instrument, but that's okay.
And I played the clarinet, listeners. We never talked about the clarinet in 700 plus episodes until high school. And I love the clarinet. In fact, I don't want to get too sidetracked on my story, but for my mother, all the grandkids, 10 years ago were doing their favorite hymn for her. And I surprised her and found a clarinet teacher that could remind me how to play the clarinet. And after a 40-year gap, I walked out and played I Know That My Redeemer Lives, her favorite song on the clarinet. So, and then I've never picked up the clarinet again. So there you go. Ben also served a mission in San Jose speaking Spanish. Ben's been out to people along the way. You were out to your mission president a little bit and others. Ben publicly came out about 3 years ago and more broadly came out just more recently in a Facebook post that I just read again this morning. We're also going to, at the end of the podcast, link to Amazing Grace, something that Ben performed. And they will talk about that. And so as the podcast ends, you can hear this song. And is that okay for an introduction?
Yeah, that's great.
So I just invite you to listen to Ben's story, and it will help you if you're somewhere in the space of non-binary, genderqueer, LGBTQ, and also all those that are better trying to understand the road these good Latter-day Saints walk. I should mention that Ben, is a member of the church and is participating as much as they're allowed. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Ben.
Sounds great. Thank you, Richard. And thanks for having me on the podcast. I'm excited. So yeah, I'm non-binary. For me, that can mean different things for different people, but for me, I feel like I'm somewhere in between male and female. I have some characteristics of both. Some non-binary people might not feel like they really identify with the idea of gender in general. Others might feel more feminine one day, more masculine another day. For me, I just feel like I'm in the middle. Non-binary is kind of an umbrella term. Transgender can also be an umbrella term, and some non-binary people like to also use the word transgender to describe themselves, meaning that they don't fit with their assigned sex at birth. Some non-binary people don't like to use that because the word transgender tends to be associated with like trans man or trans woman. For me, I like to use the word transgender in addition to non-binary because I feel like it gives me a greater sense of connection with the transgender community than I might otherwise have. That's just me personally. So as we go through this episode, I'll probably use the word transgender a lot, even though I'm technically non-binary. So I hope that's okay.
That's great.
Perfect. Another thing about me, and you mentioned the pronouns. I am using all of the pronouns. They, them is my favorite. He, him is also pretty great. She, her kind of makes me feel cringy, but for now I'm using it sort of as an experiment and also to make my transition process less stressful on me and on hopefully other people too. Just make things easier. So another thing about me is that I'm probably the only person who is named after my baby brother. in both the pun sense and the not. Uh, I was named after him because even though he's my little brother who was born after me, I have the name Ben now after he got that name. His name is Benjamin. My name's Ben. And so I am named after him too. The reason I chose my name is because I grew up being told that, well, okay, here's a little background on Benjamin. So Benjamin was born prematurely, and he lived for not very long after he was born. I was maybe about 2 years old at the time, and I've grown up hearing that and being taught that I have a little brother who I'm going to meet in the next life, and we get to be an eternal family. And I've always imagined him as my angel baby brother. And because he's an angel, I've always thought of him as being a very kind, well-rounded, Christ-like, good person with a really calming personality, the kind of person who would just like hug you and love you. And after a while, I started to realize, I think, that what I was imagining his personality to be, I don't actually know what his personality is, but what I was imagining was my ideal version of myself. And I realized that I really like the name Ben. I like the smooth masculine sound of the name. I also really like the fact that it's connected to King Benjamin because I think he's really awesome. I really love the fact that the Latin root Ben means good, and I want to be a good person. My middle name is Peter, and there are a few reasons why I chose that too. As a little kid, I was completely obsessed with Peter Pan. I wanted to be Peter Pan. I wanted to be a boy and be Peter Pan. And I also have always really super loved the story of Peter walking on the water. And even when he wasn't, like when his faith wasn't enough, that Jesus was enough and that Jesus cared about him and lifted him up instead of letting him drown. Uh, I also like the fact that the name Peter means rock. So when you put Ben, Peter together, it means good rock. And Christ is the good rock on which we should build our foundation. So when I think of my name, it reminds me of Jesus and of the kind of person that I want to be. So that's how I chose my name. Uh, so yeah, as I tell my story, I want to make it clear that this is my story and my decisions and my experiences, and I don't want that to dictate anybody else's life. I don't want anybody to be judged according to my life or to feel pressured in any way. So please don't use me and tell somebody else that you want them to be like me because they're not me, they're them. And as my story has continued to change over time, I'm sure that it will continue to change over time. So I might have different viewpoints in the future, but right now this is where I'm at. And I hope that my current perspective will be helpful to people who are in similar situations or are trying to learn. Anyway, also, as I'm talking, I hope people will keep in mind that sometimes we might have biases and perspectives that are based on things that we think God said that he might or might not have actually said. So, as we're reading the scriptures, listening to conference talks and everything, let's pay attention to what it is that God is actually saying and be willing to challenge some of the assumptions that we have because some of our assumptions about LGBTQ issues are very much based in cultural things and not so much based in things that God has actually for sure said. So, anyway, okay. First time that I remember having queer feelings was when I was about 4 years old. I know that for some people, they don't necessarily realize that they are gay or trans or non-binary until later in life. For me, it was clear that something was up when I was in preschool. I wanted to be Peter Pan, and on the preschool playground, I would ride around on my little tricycle because I couldn't actually fly, and that was the next best thing. And I would go try to save my crush, who was a little girl in my class, and I would try to save her from the pirates, who were the other kids on the playground. I don't think they actually knew what I was doing. I don't know if they knew they were pirates, but I had fun, so it was great. Also, I mentioned that I'm gay, and I've had people ask me, how does that work if you're non-binary? Uh, Basically, what I tell them is, well, I'm like half gay for girls, half straight for girls. I was assigned female at birth, and grew up having same-sex attraction and later using the term gay. So there's that. As I grew up, whenever there were opportunities to step into boy spaces, I wanted to do that. It just came naturally to me. I didn't know what the term transgender even meant. I didn't know what the term gay meant. I definitely didn't know what the term non-binary meant. I only heard that a few years ago. But this is just what came naturally to me. I wanted to sing the tenor part in choirs if they needed more tenors, or if we were doing school dances and they needed more boys, I would do the boy part, and that's just what I did. Uh, there wasn't anything like crazy. I wasn't thinking about surgeries or like sex or anything like that. It's just my personality. Uh, as I got older, as I got to be a teenager, I started to realize that this was going to be something that was really going to impact my life, probably. But I also hadn't had the chance to talk to very many other, well, really any other queer people about the subject because I was very much closeted. Even as a little kid, I had some sense that like this was something you weren't supposed to talk about, both the attraction and the gender stuff. So I didn't really. And as a teenager, I was really lucky because my mom, even though she didn't know that I was queer, she taught me that uh, feelings of same sex attraction are not a sin. And so, if you define shame as feeling that you are something bad and guilt as you did something bad, those are two separate things, very important distinction. Uh, I knew as a teenager that I was not bad and that I hadn't done something bad. So that did take away a lot of the shame, and I think it really made things a lot easier for me. I'm really grateful to my mom for that. Thanks, mom. And at the same time, there was still some shame involved. It didn't get rid of everything because I still knew that I couldn't talk to people about it. I still was pretty dang sure, and I was probably right to a certain extent, that if people knew, especially back then at the time, that I was queer, they probably would reject me. I was worried that my friends would be disgusted by me, especially the ones that I had crushes on. I was worried that they wouldn't want to be friends anymore, and that I wasn't sure if they'd figured out whether or not I was gay or non binary or trans. I thought that maybe they knew and maybe they were just being my friends in order to be nice, not because they actually wanted to be around me. But there were just all these spiraling thoughts in my head that I couldn't talk to anyone about because I couldn't face the type of rejection that I thought I might get if they could actually see who I was. I had a dream one time that uh, as a teenager, that a friend who I had a crush on could see me through a really thick pane of glass. And I knew that as she looked through that pane of glass, she could see that I was gay, but that she couldn't hear anything that I said. And so I couldn't explain to her anything about my situation. I couldn't tell her that I wasn't a pervert or a creeper. I couldn't tell her that I wasn't going to hurt her or anyone else. And I just saw this in the dream. I saw this look of disgust on her face. And I thought, this is my brain telling me what I think is going to happen if they find out. That was really stressful for me. In the dream, there was also a little girl standing there, and my friend took her by the hand and led her away from me. I think because she was scared that I would hurt this little girl, which I would never do. I'm not that kind. Like, it's yeah. I don't want people to see me and think that I'm a threat or disgusting or anything like that. I'm not perfect, obviously, but anyway, I prayed for a long time that these feelings would be taken away. At the time, I didn't understand very clearly the nature of what it is to be gay or to be trans or non-binary because I couldn't talk to people about it, and there weren't really resources to help me understand myself better. It was just a whole bunch of spiraling thoughts that were constantly out of control. Uh, I prayed for a long time for these feelings to go away because I wanted to be righteous and pure and good, and I thought that that was something that was getting in the way of my eternal salvation if I couldn't get past it. Uh, I had always wanted to serve a mission for the church, and it wasn't because of being gay, but it was because I wanted to serve God, right? I wanted to share something that was important to me about Jesus. Uh, but one of the things that I really hoped for that I had no idea at the time was kind of a cliche that happened to a lot of people was I thought, well, if I go on a mission and I'm super focused on God, then maybe those more holy thoughts can replace these impure thoughts that I'm having. And after my mission, I'll be able to move forward and marry a man and have kids and live the ideal Latter day Saint life. That's not what happened. Before my 18-month mission, I got a really great chance to serve as a Nauvoo performing missionary, playing clarinet in the Nauvoo brass band, like you said. And I thought that me getting away from my crush at the time and going to serve as a missionary, because we were full time missionaries in Nauvoo, I thought that that was going to uh, maybe help me separate myself from those feelings of same sex attraction. But right from the beginning, it started to become clear that my same sex attraction was not going away. Uh, I met a friend who I had a crush on, very sweet, awesome, kind person, and I it's a really good friendship. We're still friends, and she knows about this. Uh, at first, I was hesitant to get close to her because I didn't want the crush to develop, but we got to be really good friends, and that's a friendship I would never want to give up. Uh, I did feel kind of guilty because as a missionary, you're supposed to kind of separate yourself from like romantic feelings, right? And uh, the friendship was really great. And I felt shame because I was like, well, am I not focusing on God enough? And at one point, I got this prompting that felt like a kick in the pants or the skirt because I was a missionary that I needed to talk to my mission president and tell him that I experienced feelings of same sex attraction. Um, so I did. It took a while for me to be able to do that, but I did. And I was scared that he was going to give me extra rules to follow, or I was scared of how he'd react because I'd never told anyone before. But he was super kind and loving and told me that I was doing fine. So that comforted me a lot. After that, I served my 18-month mission. I got home and I was still gay and still non binary. And at BYU, I was focused on school and stuff. So I wasn't always focused on crushes, but I struggled fitting in as a girl, uh, struggled with knowing how to dress, and because it just didn't feel natural. Dating was difficult because I kind of thought, well, I'm just going to have to muscle through it. And First Nephi 3:7 was probably my favorite scripture. I thought that when Nephi says that God's going to prepare a way for you to do anything that he commanded you to do, I thought that that meant that he was going to either make me not gay or make it work for me to be with a man. And so far, what I've found is that God hasn't cured me of being gay or of being non-binary. He's cured me of, and he is curing me because I'm still not done, of my shame and my embarrassment. And I'm so grateful to him for that. I love I can love this part of myself. In the past, I sort of saw my queerness as, now, if you haven't read the Harry Potter books, I'm going to spoil something real quick. They've been out for years, but anyway. So in the seventh book of the Harry Potter series, you find out that Harry is a Horcrux. He's got a little piece of Voldemort's soul kind of injected into his own. And that's what I thought I was. I also really like Harry Potter. He's kind of like a second Peter Pan for me, but I have dreams that I'm him. Anyway, it's great. I defeated Voldemort one time with Alfredo sauce. It was a really weird dream, but anyway, uh, I used to think of my queerness as if I was a Horcrux, that I had a little bit of Satan injected into my soul. And I thought, well, it's okay because I know that that's not actually part of me. That's something separate from me, and that when I die, it'll go away. Which, by the way, is not a very healthy thing to tell queer people because it makes them want to die sometimes. We don't want people committing suicide to not be queer. We don't even know what the next life is going to look like for queer people. We have assumptions, but we don't actually know, as far as I understand. Anyway, so I saw myself as a Horcrux. I don't see myself like that anymore. Now this is a part of me that I see as something that I love, both my attraction and my gender identity. It's something that is part of my personality. It's part of who I am, and it's something that I can use to bless other people. And that might be a foreign concept to some of you who are listening, but it was a foreign concept to me for lots of years too. And it's not something that you can just change your mindset on right away. But listening to people's stories is helpful. I Let's see. At one point, I decided, this is probably about 10 years ago, that I needed to come out to my bishop. This is while I was at BYU, and that I also needed to come out to my parents. It was a very quiet, very small coming out. I decided for myself that I wanted to go to therapy in an attempt to make myself not queer anymore. Uh, it didn't work. If you've heard of conversion therapy, thankfully, that's pretty much not what I got, thankfully. Conversion therapy is therapy intended to make someone not gay or not trans. Uh, and the church's position on conversion therapy is that it's unethical. Therapy is great. Conversion therapy is not great. Don't do that. Uh, so I went to therapy, didn't make me not gay, but it did help me to understand myself better because I had a good therapist who let me talk through things and kind of figure things out that were going on in my head. It was so nice to finally be able to actually talk to someone about what was going on. It helped the thoughts to stop spiraling so bad. They still spiral sometimes, but it's a lot better now. Uh, so yeah, not conversion therapy, good therapy. I A few years ago, so COVID hit, and after we started going back to church in person, I got a calling that put me into contact with someone who is now a good friend, who it turns out is also non-binary, and our types of attraction are not exactly the same, but they're similar. And I realized after a while that this person was they them pronouns, so I'll use that for them. This person was a safe person to come out to, and I had come out to a couple friends before, but it wasn't quite the same. This person, I felt like I could actually really talk to and really let things out. We could bounce ideas off of each other, and it was a really awesome sense of community. And that connection is something that has absolutely changed my life, and I'm so grateful for. I know sometimes for queer people, um, it can be tempting to distance ourselves from other people because we're worried about getting feelings for them, or because we're worried about being rejected. And that makes sense, and it takes some time to work through that. So I'm not saying do this immediately necessarily, but when you can, I would definitely recommend connection with other people, especially with other queer people. Another way that I was able to find connection with queer people was by listening to the excuse me, Questions from the Closet podcast, which is now called All Out in the Open. I definitely recommend that podcast along with this one. And as I was able to hear Charlie and Ben's stories, I was able to, and also the stories of people that they interviewed, I realized, oh, these are good people. Like, nobody's perfect, and including me, but these are good people. And I was able to feel love for them. Just like Brene Brown says, it's hard to, I don't remember the quote exactly, but it's hard to hate someone up close. When I got to hear these stories, I saw myself in a lot of them, and I realized that I love those people, and I could love myself more too. My connection with that friend helped me a lot with that too, because I really love them as a person, and realizing that if they're like me, I can love that part of me too. Uh, so this non-binary friend has a sister, and I when I came out publicly on Facebook about 3 years ago, that was about the same time that when I came out publicly, a couple girls started showing interest in me, and one of them was the sister of this non-binary friend. And in my coming out post, I said basically, yeah, I'm gay and I'm non-binary or genderqueer. I'm not going to be dating girls. I'm not changing my name. Those things have changed since then. Uh, but at the time, I was thinking I'm not going to date girls, and I found out that this girl had interest in me, and I realized that I was developing some interest in her too. And I really didn't know what to do about that because I had never been in that situation before, of actually liking someone who liked me back. I had always just assumed that if I had really strong feelings for someone, if I was in love with someone, that they would never feel the same way about me. They might love me, but they'd never love me as much as I loved them. That was a really depressing, discouraging thought. And suddenly there was somebody who actually reciprocated my feelings. And I, she's a really cuddly person. And I realized this was my thought process at the time. It's changed since then, but I thought I was really uncomfortable with the idea of cuddling with a man, and I wanted to marry a man so I could live out the ideal version of the gospel life. And I thought that if I learned how to cuddle with a girl first, that then maybe I'd be more comfortable being physical with a man. Plus, I also liked this girl, and I figured that cuddling wasn't against the commandments. That's something that I kind of had assumed maybe was against the commandments, but it's actually not. There's not a rule against that. So I sneakily mentioned to her that I did not know how to cuddle, fully realizing that she would probably offer to teach me, which she did. And because I didn't want to come off as like creepy or weird, I waited for a few seconds and pretended that I was considering the idea. She knows this. Uh, and yeah, she offered to teach me how to cuddle, and I said yes. So we started going to a Come Follow Me study group, and with lots of friends who were really supportive, and we started to cuddle as we talked about Jesus. And the cuddling over time got to be more and more. We started having conversations about what kind of boundaries we needed to have because even though we both knew we liked each other, we both knew it was mutual. We thought, or my thought was that we couldn't be more than friends. We could be friends who cuddled because friends do that sometimes. We could be friends who held hands because, especially in some cultures, friends do that sometimes. But we had to be just friends. We spent time together one on one because I thought friends do that all the time. And after a while, I was saying my evening prayers, and I asked about the situation, and I actually felt better about it than I was expecting. A few weeks after that, I kissed her because I felt fine about doing that, and I realized that there wasn't actually a rule against that, even though I thought there had been. Uh, and pretty soon after that, we realized that we hadn't been calling it a relationship in an effort to like live the rules and stuff, but that it was a relationship, and we might as well call it what it was. We did know this whole time that she was going to be moving and that anything that happened was going to be short term. So we did break up about 2.5 years ago. And I'm so glad that we had that relationship. She's still a really good friend. And I learned things about myself in that relationship. Uh, I'd always felt like I don't want to get into this type of relationship because, church stuff. But when I did get into that relationship, it didn't feel like the evil satanic thing that I had always thought it would feel like. She has a lot of really good Christ-like characteristics, and I think that I do too. I would like to think that. And there were a lot of really good things about our relationship. Uh, I learned some things that I can work on for myself. I also healed a lot, and I've still got, there's always more to heal from, but I healed a lot from the idea that I could never be loved the same way that I loved someone else, or the idea that I wasn't lovable. She loved things about me that I had in the past been scared people would reject me for. And I was so lucky that she was so respectful of me and my boundaries because some queer people get into relationships. My parents didn't know about the relationship at the time. They're really great parents. felt self-conscious about it, and I didn't tell them at the time. They know now. Uh, but sometimes when queer people don't have support from friends or family who know they're in a relationship, they might get themselves into dangerous situations. I'm really lucky that my girlfriend was not dangerous. Um, but also just want to throw in that if we can be a trusted space for someone, they can tell us when they're going on dates or doing things with someone. And that way, if something goes wrong, they have someone they can talk to instead of feeling alone and like they have to handle dangerous situations on their own. Anyway, I did have like some of my siblings knew about it and some of my friends knew about it. And my parents were great about it once they found out. Uh, anyway, so that's kind of the story of my relationship. And recently, I mostly within these last few months, I started. Oh, I guess one thing I should mention with gay stuff before I move on more to uh, more trans stuff is that at this point I'm open to dating girls. I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I don't know exactly how far I'm going to go. I want to involve God in that process, and we're going to see what happens. So there's where I'm at on that. Uh, Within these last few months, I started thinking more about I would really like to change my name, and would that ever be a possibility? And uh, I went to a couple. I'm involved with a couple gatherings in the area. If you don't know, gatherings are come follow me study groups where it's a focus on basically queer people talking about Jesus or allies talking about Jesus. Um, you can find more information about that on the Lift and Love website, as well as other opportunities to meet with queer people and allies. Um, but at one of these gatherings, I tried out a different name and pronouns. It wasn't Ben; it was one that I didn't like as much as Ben. But then when the Gather conference came out, which is a new annual uh, conference in Provo and now in some other places too, for queer people and those who love them, it's faith affirming and identity affirming. Anyway, I went to Gather conference and I decided, I think based on a prompting, if I remember right, that I was going to try out a new name. So I tried out the name Ben, and I talked to some really wonderful people who were very respectful of my name. They called me Ben, they used they them pronouns for me, and it just felt like home. It felt like it fit. It felt like I was taking off a heavy backpack that I'd been carrying around for years and years. And I just felt comfortable and good. And there was a gender identity breakout session, and I sat in a room full of uh, gender nonconforming people of all types, transgender, non-binary, uh, and I could really feel their love for God and God's love for them. And I just felt like I could be myself, and it was great and really comfortable. The next day, I went to church, or the day after Gather Conference, I went to church, and some really friendly people asked me what my name was, and I had to use my old name, and I felt cringy. I went to a gathering that night, and I went by Ben, and immediately I felt better, and I was like, okay, dang it, what do I do? So I prayed about it, and I thought a lot about it in addition to thinking that I'd done before. And I went to the temple 7 times over the space of 3 weeks because I knew that if I were to change my name, I would probably lose my temple recommend. Uh, that is still in process, so we're not at the conclusion of that quite yet. But um, because the current rule is that if you transition, even if it's just socially, even if there's no hormones or surgery, that you lose your recommend basically. And there are other church restrictions too. Um, Anyway, as I went to the temple and prayed about this, I kept getting the answer over and over that yes, changing my name is the right thing for me to do at this time of my life. I feel confident about this. There's still some fear involved of the unknown, but I feel like I'm making the right choice that will be best for my mental health and also that will help me to help other transgender and non binary people and gender non-conforming people to feel welcome at church. Um, that's my hope anyway, and also to help other people to learn from my story so that they can maybe be more understanding and loving and compassionate of the transgender and otherwise queer people in their own lives. I hope that it'll help improve people's relationships with each other. And I think that, a lot of church leaders are, in order to have certain callings, you have to be married, which makes it very likely, not impossible, but very likely that a lot of church leaders, both local and general, are probably not queer. And if I can share my story, maybe that will help to increase understanding so that future policies can be a little bit more helpful than the ones that we have now. Um, anyway, I guess as I finish this segment, I do want to share a couple experiences that I've had with Christ. Um, as I've discovered more, as I've processed more of my queer experience, I've been learning that while I think in the past I tended to see the church as more of a thing about, or to see the gospel as a thing more about rules. And yes, rules are still important. I'm not saying that they're not, but um, I think the most important part is that religion is supposed to help us to be good people. I want to get to the end of my life, and even if I were to look back and even if I were to find out that the church wasn't true, I hope that I would be able to look back and say that I lived a good life, and look back and say, like, I'm a good person. I did good things. I helped people to be happier. Um, anyway, one experience that I had, I was a couple of years ago, I was playing in the Nauvoo bagpipe band for the Nauvoo pageant. And as a bagpipe band, we went to the Nauvoo temple. I fell asleep for most of the session because I was really tired. But when I got to the celestial room, I was wide awake because I was standing up. And I remember being in the celestial room and just feeling like, I don't know if I belong here. And sorry, getting a little bit emotional. Um, because I thought, how does a person like me, how does a queer person like me fit in the celestial kingdom? And honestly, I still don't totally know. I think God has a plan, but and I think it's a good one. Otherwise, He would have told me. But as I was standing in the celestial room, I said a little prayer, basically telling God how I was feeling and expressing that I wasn't sure if I fit. And as I opened my eyes after that prayer, I had my head bowed, so I was looking down, and right there on um, the white carpet floor in front of me, there was a little rainbow pattern, and it was coming from the sun was just at the right angle outside, coming through the window, so that there was a rainbow pattern right in front of my feet. Um, and I thought, well, that could totally be a coincidence. I see rainbows everywhere. Like, I don't want to, put words in God's mouth. I don't want to misunderstand what He's telling me here. So maybe that's just a coincidence. And then I looked away from that rainbow, and I just happened to look at a spot on the wall where I had never noticed before, even though I've been in Nauvoo so many times. There's a painting of a rainbow in the celestial room. And that was where my eyes just naturally went. And I thought, like, really? Two times, like, totally on accident, you put two different types of rainbows right in front of me. What the heck? That's cool. And that helped me to feel like I have a place with God, that He wants me in the temple, whether or not other people agree or understand, no matter what. Anyway, even if the policy doesn't even necessarily agree. Uh, and another experience that I really want to share is that a few years ago, I had a very clear prompting that I needed to go visit Israel. And I thought, really, that's random. Like, I mean, that sounds cool. Like, God wants me to spend like a few $1,000s. Sure, like that sounds irresponsible, but if He says so, I'll do it. So I went to Israel, and it was about a week and a half long trip. On the very last day, we went to the Garden of Gethsemane, and we went to the Garden Tomb. I had a great experience at the Garden of Gethsemane. It was very peaceful. And I knew that later that night we'd be driving to the airport and going home. So the Garden Tomb experience was really going to be kind of the climax and the last thing that we were going to do. In my house, we have a picture of me and my parents. I was about, I don't know, a couple of years old or something at the time, in front of the garden tomb. And
Oh,
they're smiling and paying attention. I'm sitting on the ground playing with the toy. um, and I thought as I went to Israel, wouldn't it be cool if I could get a picture of me as an adult in front of the garden tomb, like actually paying attention this time? And so me and my tour group and my friend that was with me, we got close to the front of the line to go take our turns to step into the garden tomb. I was going to take a picture right beforehand, but right as we got up there, another tour group showed up, and a man who worked at the garden tomb, I think he was kind of the equivalent of a senior missionary, but for a different church. Um, he must have been having a bad day. I'm sure he's a great person, hopefully. But he was kind of grumpy at us and told us, no taking pictures. Don't take pictures in front of the garden tomb. We've got a lot of people here. Just get in, get out so we can get everybody through. And he wasn't particularly kind in the way that he said it. I was tired at the end of a trip, and I was upset that I wasn't going to be able to take this picture, and that this man didn't seem to understand that I had come all the way from the United States to see this, and that um, maybe it was okay for me to take a few extra seconds after all of that. I kind of understand where he's coming from, but also when I walked into the garden tomb after not getting the picture, um, which my friend is great, who was going to take the picture anyway. If you're listening, you're awesome. As I walked into the tomb, instead of feeling the spirit, I felt angry. I felt like my experience didn't matter to this man. And I just looked around the tomb and was like, well, it's an empty tomb. I guess that experience is ruined because now I just feel upset. Um, I wanted to feel the spirit there, but I didn't. And it was a letdown for sure. As I was walking away from the tomb, I was still feeling really angry and sad about the situation. And it occurred to me, you know what? God is really good at taking negative things and turning them into something positive. So I figured maybe he can do that for me here. And uh, I thought, well, in order to do that, I probably need to process some of my emotions. And maybe a good place to start is to think about what it is that I'm feeling. And I identified that the thought in my mind that was making me feel so upset was that I was feeling pushed aside, like my experience didn't matter. And immediately when I had that thought, I had the very clear word for word prompting come to my mind. I would never push you aside. And that has really stuck with me as I've been working through my experience as a queer member of the church, because even though sometimes we as members, in an attempt to be righteous, might push people aside who we perceive as sinful, Christ knows that all of us are where we're at. He's been there, He's walked with us, and He knows us better than anyone else does. He's the only one that has the right or the ability to judge us. And He told me, or at least the Spirit did, and I felt like it was a connection to Christ, that He would never push me aside. So when I feel pushed aside as a member of the church, or just as a person, and by the way, the words that I've been in have all been really supportive. It's just usually kind of the occasional person, usually someone who doesn't know me. But when I have felt pushed aside, uh, I feel more okay because I know that it's not Christ that's doing that, and He never would. So, yeah.
tell us about Amazing Grace. Well, let me make some comments first, and then we'll. I wanted to do that because that'll be closer when we actually people can listen to it. Um, you are awesome. You are so spiritually mature. You're so um, void of shame for who you are, and just own who you are in such a good, healthy way that I think it helps other people that are new to this road or needing your mature, spiritually sound voice. So I'm so glad you've come on the podcast, and I've learned a lot from you. And these are some of the things, as regular listeners know, I kind of write down things that kind of resonate with me. But I love this. you didn't call it a superpower in the choir, but you talked about how I could do the boy parts and the girl parts at time. So
Mhm.
some of my non-binary friends come to look at this part of them being non-binary, and the initial challenge is shame, like you've talked about. But sometimes they get to the point, this is actually really good, and I can do more good in our world and our community because of the unique way I am. And so I love this. That was a positive part of your story, and you didn't call it a superpower, but it's kind of maybe a superpower that cis people don't have, and maybe society's better off with cis people and non-binary people because we can do more in our combined differences to help the lives of others. And God is a God of diversity and brings diversity together to create beauty. Beauty is often created in nature through diversity, and all that diversity coming together to create beauty. Um, Now I can't read my writing. I love that you people take names on. We name children based on people we love or people we look up to. Sports people kind of get a name sometimes for their kids based on their favorite, sport, their favorite sports hero. But I love your story of Ben and honoring and the story behind that name, and I think it honors Ben, your brother who passed away, and all the Bens. And I just love that part of your story. I think that's terrific. And just giving grace to people that choose a new name. And it doesn't cost me anything as a Latter-day Saint. We ask, society to use our proper name as a church. So I think we can learn to extend the grace to people within our faith that also feel a different name that better reflects who they are. You talked about intrusive thoughts. You didn't use that word, but you talked about how these thoughts I'm feeling are a sin. And I would think you're really brave to share that on the podcast, Ben. And I've I wrote down thoughts are not a sin. I think intrusive thoughts. Some people get really intrusive thoughts that are completely different than their values. I won't even share some of those because you don't want them in your mind. But I think we need to normalize that just thoughts are part of being human, and and not to feel guilty for those or shame or God's disappointed in me. I think there's probably things we can do with the content we read, the media exposed to decrease the thoughts. But I think we just have to recognize the thoughts we feel are not a sin. And if we're not straight or cis, we're going to have thoughts along our orientation or our gender identity, like you've talked about. And I think we need to just recognize that's part of who we are. And there's no sin in thoughts. I love your point about, I think I wrote this down, tried to write it down word for word. God is curing me of shame around being queer versus curing you of being queer. Ben Shalati was the first one that sort of taught me that principle. And he said that I thought the atonement made me straight, but it healed my broken heart. So that's really powerful language you use, Ben, is just the ability of God to cure me of shame. Shame is one of, I believe, Satan's greatest tools to separate from love of our heavenly parents and falsely conclude that who we are, especially if we don't fit in the mold, that our heavenly parents are disappointing us, and that just causes us to not. It causes shame, and then it's harder to talk to God. And one of the themes of your podcast, Ben, is you just talk to God all the time. Um, I liked your story about dating. I think you learned a lot, and I just, people that are gay, I wasn't followed. I think they need to figure out how best to walk that road. And sometimes same-sex dating, I'm not giving a blanket endorsement to that. It's a very personal decision. Is part of the learning process to figure out your best path forward in life and who you are. And I like that you said I learned a lot in that situation. So I think that's good. I think it's very better clarified your best path forward. I love your point about dangerous situations. So I think as a parent or as a friend, I think it's okay to say if you choose to same sex date, I want to know that part of your life. Sometimes, and just proactively share that. I don't think it increases the chance of same sex dating where you're sort of giving a blanket okay to that. But I think it's saying, I want to be with you, because if you're vulnerable and get in a real dangerous situation, it's harder to reach out. And sometimes in an abusive situation, it creates an environment where somebody can't reach out and they're in a controlled relationship. And there's so much added shame in that they can't open up. So I love you talked about dangerous situations and you did have some people. This wasn't one for you. You were clear about that, but you recognize that can be for others. Next thing I wrote down is personal revelation is personal. At the end of the day, Ben, you've got to, own your own story, and you're doing that in the best authentic way you can. And you're pretty mature in this space. You've had a lot of experiences and done a lot of good things. So my feeling is just to continue to trust you as you write your own story and say, I'll walk with you as you figure out your best path forward. I love that you love the temple. And I recognize the complexity of that is that, you're not able to attend or you're figuring that out. But behind that is just obviously you have a testimony of the temple and want to do those ordinances for people on the other side. And so I just recognize your heart. It's, wanting to serve there and you being authentic to who you are, socially transitioning can and may change that. So I just mourn with you but recognize why you want to go to the temple. I love that experience you shared in the temple, Nauvoo Temple, when we were there as a family in the pageant, which is a real stretch for me, but a beautiful experience for our family. It was just a beautiful chance to be in that temple. I love that temple. And then these powerful personal revelation. I would never. Oh, I can't read my writing. You may have to help me, Ben. I would never
I,
push you to be. Who? What did you say there?
I would never push you aside.
I would. That's yeah. I would never push you aside.
Yep,
Wow.
word for word.
I would never push you aside. And that's really powerful personal revelation you've received from a very difficult experience in a very sacred place. And sometimes that's symbolize what can happen in a church setting or a family setting that should be our safest. And then this God that you talk about, that I believe in so deeply, I would never push you aside, Ben. And makes me want to be like the person, like that statement. It wants me to do what I can do in my circle of influence to help you feel loved, accepted, and maybe more importantly, we're actually better off with you. You being non-binary and gay, actually, I think is part of what Elder Cooks talks about unity and diversity, and they're not opposites. So sameness is not the same as unity. And diversity to me, where we're unified in purpose, helping people feel the love of God, come into the gospel of Jesus Christ, you're part of that. And so I recognize that it's just, recognize where we are, that you can't fully participate potentially because you are non-binary and it's doing some social transitioning. So I just acknowledge the complexity of that. Um, that's all I have to say, listeners. What I'll do now is just, three things. First of all, thank you, Ben Higinbotham, for being on the podcast. You are awesome. And I hope I've done a good job with your they, them pronouns, but I haven't had to use your pronouns too much, which is good. I try to do the best I can, listeners, just like all of you. But I love that you're upfront with your pronouns. So it gives me the chance to, because I want to do the right thing and gently correct if I needed. So you're awesome and you have a great life ahead of you. And you've done so much to get yourself in this really confident, spiritually grounded, non shaming space you're in where you just own who you are. And I think it's how God created you and it's a good thing. It doesn't need to be undone. We're better off with you. But what I'll do is next two things, you just any more closing comments you want to share, and then you can introduce Amazing Grace. And I won't come on again, listeners. I'll sign off right now. But when Ben concludes, we will hear Amazing Grace that will splice into the podcast.
Okay, thank you. So just one quick thought I had. I know sometimes on the podcast you'll ask people, let's say that you're a parent and your kid comes to you and tells you that they might be transgender or non-binary, and maybe as a parent you wonder if it's a phase. What do you do? I just wanted to really quickly put my thought in there on that. There's in a situation like that, there's more going on than just the kid telling you this. Um, in my experience, at least, sometimes it's actually harder to talk to people who are close to you because you're worried that like the rejection is going to be harder. Like I could maybe talk to a stranger or even like a therapist about something and I'm not as scared, but talking my parents are great and also talking to them about stuff was really hard because I know that if it went badly, it could negatively impact my life. Thankfully, they've been really good about it. Um, but as a parent, if your kid comes to you and is like, "Hi, I might be transgender or non-binary," I would say maybe don't treat it as if it is a phase. Just trust them. Don't say anything that makes them feel like you hope that they're not transgender or that they're not non-binary. What they need is a safe space where they feel loved and where they can feel comfortable to figure things out. Um, and I'm very blessed to have a family that loves me as I am. I really want that for other people too. Um, and they deserve to be loved just like anyone else. Um, so yeah, as far as Amazing Grace goes, I played clarinet with a group, and my director found out I played bagpipes, and she said, "Hey, can we do something with bagpipes?" And I thought like that would be great, but we don't have an arrangement that involves bagpipes. So I got thinking, well, what can we play? And one of the most requested tunes that we get as bagpipers, I play the bagpipes. So I don't remember if I mentioned that. Uh, one of the most requested tunes is Amazing Grace. And I felt like that would be fitting for the situation that we were going to use it for. So she told me that I could write an arrangement of Amazing Grace for our group. So I wrote this arrangement of Amazing Grace. It's kind of long because I loved so many of the words and didn't want to take them out. One thing that I do want to point out is that there's a line that I actually did change, just one word. Um, it's the original lyrics are "'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved." Um, I changed it to "'Tis grace that taught my heart to heal." Anyway, I don't think that this gospel is supposed to be a gospel of fear. I think it's supposed to be a gospel of love and healing and progression, no matter who we are. Um, I know that some people, I mean, including me, sometimes it's hard to understand how you can be gay or non binary or transgender or queer in any way and to be a Christian. But I believe that really being a Christian isn't just about things being the perfect, ideal cookie cutter life that I thought I had, or that I thought I was going to have. I believe that being a Christian is trying to be like Christ. Weird. um, in Mosiah, when Alma's baptizing people, and he talks about basically what it is that they're covenanting, he talks about mourning with those that mourn and comforting those that stand in need of comfort. And I always kind of thought it was interesting that, like, why is he saying that specifically right before they're going to get baptized? Because you make other covenants in, like, in the temple, they tell you exactly what it is that you're covenanting, right? But when you get baptized, there isn't that. You're just told that you're getting baptized, and maybe you have discussions about it beforehand. But I realized that when you're baptized, what it is that you're promising to follow Christ. And the reason that Alma taught people about mourning with those that mourn and comforting those that stand in need of comfort is that that's literally who Christ is. Mourning with those that mourn is what the atonement was. That's what he did for us. He walked in our shoes. When he talked in the Sermon on the Mount about um, if someone asks you to walk a mile with them, walk with them twain. Didn't he do that for us? He walked in our shoes with us, and he's gone farther than we could ever expect anyone to. He knows us. And I am loving this chance to get to know him better. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying. And I'm just really grateful. I'm really grateful. Oh, sorry. I'm really grateful for him and what he's done for me. So, yeah, this is my musical testimony. I got to play the bagpipes and do this arrangement, but this isn't supposed to be about me. This is supposed to be about him. So I hope you enjoy that recording of Amazing Grace. It's my testimony of him.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found, was blind